the Philippines is a large archipelago where people use many different languages in different contexts. There's of course the Tagalog regions where they use Tagalog, which is the official language of the Philippines. Now herein lies the problem. A lot would ask themselves, now why would this be a problem? Tagalog is the most common language, so it should have some legitimacy in being an official language, right? Wrong. Now there's a lot of things to consider, but these are the main points that I want to demonstrate in this video. So 1, Tagalog is not used frequently enough across the Philippines for it to be properly designated as an official language. Tagalog is not the problem. The implementation of Tagalog as a national language is. Now in spite of that, politicians in the Philippines actively force the entirety of the Philippines to use Tagalog, even if it doesn't make sense to use it. Now, to start off with proving point number 1, we need to do a bit of history and then statistics on language use. Back in the 1500s, the Philippines really had no mutual language. It was only in the 16th century that Spanish became the official language of the country during the time that they colonized the Philippines. In 1762, the then British Empire invaded Manila, and that's when Filipinos were first familiarized with English. However, the use of English as a language did not materialize. Over the next century, the national language would switch from Spanish to Tagalog. Now, there are some contested reports over the usage of Spanish amongst the masses, as according to a report, Spanish priests, as the teachers of instruction, did not want to promote it amongst those said masses, as they felt that them learning Spanish would make them proud and rebel against the government in place. Now, during the American occupation was when English became an official language of the Philippines. Spanish was still not known by a lot of native people, but English would eventually be used en masse. In 1946, Manuel Quezon finally declared Tagalog as the official language, and that's where the problem starts. The problem is, Tagalog was not used frequently outside of the South Luzon regions and the Palawan regions. So essentially, Manuel Quezon imposed Tagalog as a language wherein only one part of the country spoke it regularly or even cared about it at all. And that is extremely problematic. Because of that policy, it indirectly influences how people see Tagalog across the Philippines. Now, while it makes sense to implement in the Tagalog-speaking regions of South Luzon and Palawan, it does not make sense to implement it outside of those regions. Now, the non-Tagalog regions make up more than 60% of the entire country's population. And that begs to ask, why would you impose a language officially if the majority do not speak it? Now, you might think that this is just a guideline as to how Tagalog should be implemented, as opposed to actually enforcing it as a policy, as in to force people to use the language. However, a lot of legislation proves otherwise. First, there was the move to rebrand Tagalog as Filipino. But in reality, this is just a useless distinction to put some legitimacy in Tagalog as an official language. Now, according to Ricardo Nolasco, who is in charge of this by the way, political designations aside, Tagalog and Filipino are linguistically the same, sharing, among other things, the same grammatical structure. Filipino was simply Tagalog in syntax and grammar, with as yet no grammatical element or lexicon coming from Ilocano, Cebuano, Hiligaynon, or any of the other Philippine languages. So, if you don't see the renaming of Tagalog as Filipino as just an attempt of rebranding to make it more official than it really is, I hope you do now. Manuel Quezon implemented an idiotic, ineffective solution to the problem of a country that is very linguistically diverse. Now, you would think that these politicians now would have learned from Ricardo Nolasco, but they didn't. Here are some examples of how recent legislation still attempts to push Tagalog as a national language when it's not supposed to. In 2019, a barangay in Misamis Oriental got into legal trouble because they sang Lupang Hinirang in Bisaya when it is in Tagalog by default. Now, you guys might have been surprised that yes, there is in fact a national anthem in Bisaya. Now, according to the law, in singing the national anthem, it needs to be in its original Filipino lyrics and march tempo. Ergo, singing it in its Bisaya form is not allowed. But it's very interesting to note that actually, Lupang Hinirang was not initially Tagalog at all. but rather Kapampangan, as, according to Kirby Araulo, the original version of the anthem was based off of a Kapampangan author. In July 2022, Robin Padilla, a celebrity pretending to be a politician, expressed dismay over Filipinos' preference of English over Tagalog in official documents. In reality, even English is more frequently used across the Philippines than Tagalog. In August 2023, Sara Duterte removed mother tongue as a necessary subject in schools, thus practically removing the ability for students to learn their native language in school. Now, this is ironic because she is actually Bisaya speaking, so she is basically co-signing the linguistic stagnation of her own native language. ABS-CBN News posted a picture showing how Cebuano is different from Bisaya. However, a quick look at any study talking about this linguistic subject would tell you that Bisaya is just another name for Cebuano. So, hopefully that made you realize that this honest framing by Filipino media to make Tagalog look more frequently used across the Philippines than it really is. Now, aside from reversing all those policies that I just mentioned, what are some other solutions to this problem? First, and probably the easiest solution, is removing Tagalog as an official language. That would also entail demoting Tagalog to just a regional language like it ought to be. Second, and somewhat more unpopular, I would say, would be to make English the official language. Now, there would be some resistance for sure, especially from Filipinos who do not want to be part of the Anglosphere just for the sake of economic necessity. That's fair. But English here is used in business, in legal matters, and also signposts all across the Philippines. And there's even Taglish, which is the bastard child of Tagalog, but that's another story for another day. A third solution would be to implement a language that actually incorporates all the different languages of the Philippines into that language. An implementation that I saw, and actually interviewed about before, is a language called Luzviminsaw. However, it might take some time to implement, as language use might take a few generations to be familiarized, unless people know about it explicitly. So, all of those solutions are much better than just maintaining the status quo of having Tagalog promoted over other languages. In this video, hopefully you realize that multilingual countries have to observe the usage of its language minorities. The Philippines' current implementation of imposing Tagalog imperialism is harmful to the other languages used within the archipelago. Political Solid Reporting, that's all for now. What do you think about this? Like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.